Hi everyone, welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Car Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple, and tonight I am very happy to welcome Kinsale Drake to celebrate her book, The Sky Was Once a Dark Blanket. Let's give a hand for Kinsale. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all of you for turning out. This is our first event of 2025. I think we're starting off pretty well. It's pretty great. So we have a really big year ahead of us. And I'll just say that because you all know what I mean. So whether this year is about rest or resistance or both, it's a big year for all of us. And I'm very glad to be gathered here with you. Thank you for choosing literature. Thank you for choosing literary solidarity. I'm glad that you chose to be with us tonight of all the places that you could be when it's dark and cold. You chose to be with poetry and people, which is pretty cool. So thank you. We are broadcasting, hello online audience. We are broadcasting from San Francisco. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement. We are operating on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land. We think at Green Apple that acknowledgement requires action, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement, particularly for non-Native folks as well. We have details at the back desk that will take you right to the Ramaytush Ohlone Land Trust. That's usually where we direct people, and you can go there if you want to learn more about how to participate in this project of rematriation. 2025, I said it's going to be a big year, but I think it's especially going to be a big year for land back wins, and this is our small effort to make that so. So info is back there. Very brief business before we move on to the heart of the evening. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. Picture taking is okay, but don't take a call. That would be embarrassing. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season coming up starting tonight. The restroom is behind me. It is available after the event and not during the event for obvious reasons. If you need to know how to get there, do let me know, and I'll gladly tell you. We have copies of Kinsale's book at the front register. You can find them there. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you also support the writers who put so much work into making this book, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you're able, I also know it's right after the holiday season, and some of you are maybe trying not to spend money, which I understand. But if you are able, what better reason to do so than to support artists and poetry? Why not? Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the writer who's joining us tonight. First, Kinsale Drake is a Deneb poet, playwright, and performer raised in the Southwest. She is a winner of the 2023 National Poetry Series. Her work has appeared in Poetry Magazine, Best New Poets, Black Warrior Review, MTV, Teen Vogue, Time, and many other publications. She recently graduated from Yale University, where she received the J. Edgar Meeker Prize, the Academy of American Poets College Prize, the Young Native Playwrights Award, and the 2022 Joy Harjo Poetry Prize. She was named by Time Magazine as an artist representing her decade by, quote, changing how we see the world, end quote, and she is the founder of Indian Girls Book Club. Her collection, The Sky Was Once a Dark Blanket, is out now from University of Georgia Press, and it is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more hand for Kinsale.
Hi. I'm going to move the chair back. Hi, everyone. I'm just looking at everyone's faces. Hi, friends! In the back! They were here when this baby was cooking! That's crazy! Oh my gosh. Yate, everyone, yate, Kinsale Drake nishe. Nat odin e tachina nishle, bilagana bashishchi. Ashihidasha che, bilagana dashinole. Akut ego atsana nishle. Hi, my name is Kinsale Drake, and I'm so excited to be here because I lived here last year. I lived in Japantown, and I lived with my best friends who are here in the front row. And this is a very special city to me. It's so full of life and art and poetry and beauty. So I'm just so happy to be back. This is actually my first time back since I moved away. So I've been really enjoying it. This is like the one city where the fog and the rain actually feels really nice, and doesn't feel like oppressive. So I really appreciate that about this city. I really appreciate you coming out. I am in grad school, so I came all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, and the other parts of my time are taken up really. Claire and Celeste saw this literally firsthand. Also, anybody who's been inside my apartment, you see the stacks of boxes and books and all of the things that we use for book club. That's like my whole other part of my life. So I associate being here with really like getting into book club. Like we would go to the post office every week, like sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. And I would take my little grandma cart and I would like walk to the post office, drop off all the packages, walk back. So I have a lot of really good memories here. I'm gonna read from this collection and I'm just gonna move through it. It's just, I want this space to be focused on storytelling and listening, and I am really appreciative recently of spaces like this, and for a number of reasons, but I mean, we're going through, a lot of our communities are going through really horrible, tough times and moments, like not that we ever weren't, but it's feeling very horrific right now, you know, especially with the genocide in Palestine, you know, with many of our communities now facing a lot of harm from the incoming administration. And for me, stories are a way of seeing the future that we are still working towards in solidarity with one another. And always remember in college going to a lecture from Angela Davis and her saying, artists are the way that we can envision and build the futures that we're going to bring to fruition. It was something like that. So I think of that every time I'm in a space. So I hope that, you know, you feel comfortable here and we can just enjoy some poetry together. This book is really special to me because it's about creation stories, it's about memory, and I worked on this collection. I was super into music. I always say, like, write your obsessions. That's what I think a lot of poets encourage. And this really was just a book of love and memory. And the poetry begins with a poem that's inspired by Jimi Hendrix, which I think is fitting because this city, I think, has a huge musical history, especially from the 60s and 70s. So I'm excited to be reading some poems about music. I'm just going to move through the first 2 pieces. Spangled. Enough about you. Airwaves in bloom, mouthpiece on fire. I must sing the hum of the yucca and icy heartbeat of river. I must sing our grandparents' blues knocked down in the grasses and thick in the farmhouse. Oh, like Jimmy's guitar, I must sing, dirty, sing, blister, let the sound rip the sky. Rush of birds spooked from deep in our throats, our song. 1 August. My mother's soft instrument. I am stomping at 11 a.m. on God's holiest day. My grandmother turning up her hands in something like protest. Her face just softened by the rainbow of a smile. Oh joy, I overturn the sweet peas in the garden with my bare feet. Instruments of disaster, instruments of my mother, who used to sneak out to border towns and line dance with cowboys. We missed the days the rain fell on our foreheads and the kettle boiled over. When I want to call up the memory of these women, I sit with the familiar orchestra of scratched up CDs. Shh, just there. The instruments of our own destructions and births, umbilical cords, planting season. I want to roll in the mud and be a mother. I want the seeds to two-step on my skin. Thank you. You can snap, you can clap. Don't feel embarrassed. It's okay. Has anybody been to who has not been to a poetry reading before? Okay. That's all good. You just snap. You snap when you like you hear something, and some people feel like clapping is too loud, especially after like a sad poem or something. They're like, oh, like what do I do? But snapping is, I'm good with snapping. Whatever you want to do. There's a couple poems in here at the beginning about Mildred Bailey. My older sibling is, when I was growing up, they were super into jazz music. My older sibling right above me was like my role model when I was a kid. Like, they were so cool to me. Now I know that they were just like a hipster, like they were like a regular millennial. But like, to me, they were like the coolest person in the world. I was like, wow, what the fuck is Passion Pit? Like, this is so awesome. But they were so fundamental to my taste making, and they were really into jazz and old movies. And one of our favorite singers, well, a lot of our favorite singers from back, we had loved Billie Holiday, we loved Ella Fitzgerald, and there's this singer from around the same time period called Mildred Bailey, and she was Coeur d'Alene. She came out to New York City, and she was a jazz singer, and she sang some really early renditions or original versions of what became the American Songbook. But she was Native, and she actually met and knew Louis Armstrong before he got really famous, and she was friends with Bing Crosby. So she was really amazing, and I love her voice. So these poems, I think, I'm actually saying all this and I'm about to skip all the poems about her, but if you want to read about it and you want to look her up and listen to her music, I suggest that. Because I would rather have you read them than like try to sing some of the song lyrics in that section. The next poem I want to read, it's from the water section. So the second section of the book, we move into water. And if you didn't know, the whole Southwest used to be this huge ocean. And growing up, we were a family of movement, which is like if you are from a reservation or if you have family on the res, you know that like your whole existence is just moving. Like it's a long distances, and you're time traveling in a way, like a lot of ways. Like whether you're with your family and you're telling stories in the car, you might notice like time kind of collapses in on itself. Like things go by faster. There's actually theories by Native poets who say that storytelling is a form of time travel because of that. You also, moving through the Southwest, you see all the fossils from those animals that came before. There's dinosaur tracks, there's trilobites, like you can see the literal times and layers of time in the rock, which is something super powerful and incredible to know that there's so many layers in one space, like across time. And you know, it's almost like this, what happens in a poem. A poem is a series of layered effects. So in terms of like the ocean, I think growing up and being a little girl moving through these landscapes and being aware of like scale and how massive everything seemed, like fitting into that in a way still, and knowing that you are from those areas was a really powerful feeling. So the second section of the book has a lot to do with the prehistoric ocean, basically. So this is after I drink my water, after sacred water. After sacred water. 1. In the summers, we would flock to my great aunt's swimming hole down the canyon, dizzy from the jumbling in a truck bed, poke at the tadpoles squirming in the red clay. My mother watched from orchard shade. She had been down here many years before with her sisters, her brothers, picking apples, following the bend of the river, leading the goats to the wayside to drink. Now the water glooms with cow manure. Uranium, we trace the mud with our eyes, watch the petroglyphs stretch in the shadows, miss the feeling of the sun wicking river from our skin. 2. In 1956, the Glen Canyon Dam began construction with an explosion, was hit with a demolition blast keyed by the push of a button. in the Oval Office. The bottom of the canyon dotted by Navajo, Ute, Paiute footprints still cooling. The explosion, a scar in the earth still aching with uranium mines. Yellow cake, yellow corn tumbled in the runoff. What do you call ancestral homestead stopped like a kitchen sink? The water of your people redirected to ranches, fatten cattle that render the San Juan undrinkable, quench the white men in bars that don't admit Indians, water and mineral packed into bombshells. How do you drown by your own artery? Today, the lake has never been shallower, a drought of its own becoming. Not even time to weep before the crossing, before the fleeing, marina of familiar fossils. Zebra mussels scour the bones of old adobe, still beneath the surface. The ancient sun rendered closer every day as the ranchers lament the withering. The tourists dock their houseboats. The people who have known this land see the slick rock still emerging. 3. In the third world, Coyote took the water monster's baby. So the water monster decided to make it rain endlessly. The water rose and choked the peaks of sacred mountains. The beings that lived there did not know where to escape the flood. And what saved the world was a reed curling into the sky, a way to climb out into a fourth world. 4. There are things that remain stolen, that holy people weep for, and others look to us with upturned hands, ask where the reeds come from, flee to the highest peaks, dream of another world they can scurry into through a wound in the sky they created. We have no answer for them. We have known this the entire time. So we tell our stories, go to the water, tend this land, and remember. Thank you. This next poem is about being gay and and riding in a truck, listening to George Strait. Oh, that's okay. So entering this collection, I was really curious in college when I was writing this. I was studying ethnomusicology, and so a thread in this book is music and what people stereotypically think of as native music, i.e. like flute music, like super like mystical, like nonsense. That derives from anthropologists. Like most everything is anthropologists' fault. And a lot of what we know about natives is because natives were being forced onto reservations. You know, there was active erasure happening, and anthropologists were trying to dissect and categorize because they assumed natives were a dying race. So one of those things was the containment of voices within wax cylinders, which is something that's in a poem in this collection, wax cylinder recordings. Also, that's the reason why the biggest collection of Navajo music is actually in Germany, at the Herzog archives. And so, you know, being that far from homelands, there's a lot of conversations to be had about, you know, those should be returned. There's a lot of, I think, tension across bodies of water between the dispossessed and what's been taken from them. But all that to say, I was thinking a lot about music and what people and basically academics even see native music as. And kind of the thesis of the collection was native music is whatever native people listen to, you know, whatever memories, whatever core memories, you know, are conjured when we listen to certain genres and certain songs, like that is your genealogy, like that is your specific origin story in a way. And so I always joke, and like I go to Durango, and this gets a big laugh, but I'll be like, yeah, like George Strait is already Navajo, like he's already somebody's Navajo uncle, like he's obviously more Navajo music than what I think people would normally think of as like Native music. But this is theme for the nautical cowboy. My mother wouldn't let me go to the rodeo when I was younger. So I jet off with my girl in her truck to a George Strait song. It's in our cosmology to chase the tails of dogs over the horizon. The sky stretches, map of strange stars. I list the star signs of my exes, none of them from Texas. We cheers our Baja blasts. Almost all sacred things are blue. Baby blue, baby blue. You joke, you'll never date a white boy. You sing a love song to shit straight hair and nighttime eyes. The compass needle stays glued to the moon. I catch your eyes in every mirror. There was once a prehistoric ocean all around us, even whales. We puff out the great swimming shapes of their bodies. This layer of rock, trilobites, this layer some ancient eel. How small we are, how funny. Massive fish ghosts vibrate to George Strait. Time is read backwards in the rock body, oldest to the top, magma pushing what's fresh to the surface. Your hand skims the deep blue sandstone, these long cooled shells, teardrop, turquoise sliver of horizon, the creeping river invisible in the dark. Here's to you, ancient and alive. The sky stretches, full of old and older ghosts, our once and forever waiting pool. Thank you. Okay, the next piece. Oh, we're gonna have a little Q&A after this. So I'm not gonna read the whole book. I could, because it's pretty short, but I'm always like, I gotta do some mystery. Like, I actually gotta buy the book, you know? But I wanna read Creation Story Blues. This is where the title of the book comes from. I wrote this piece. I worked in LA as a teenager. My family, okay, like there's like 20 stories popping into my head, but my family, we're not from California, but we lived for a while. My parents, when they first moved to California, they were living in LA, and then they were living in Long Beach, where my mom was a teacher, and then my dad got a job, so like they moved back to like LA. But this is all to say, the topography of LA is very burned into my memory, especially the lack of public transportation, if you've ever been to LA. But I think growing up as well, I worked in the community theater scene in LA. I would drive myself there every day after school for work, and I worked 6 days a week, and it was so much fun. And I was always the youngest person in the room or on set or whatever it was. And most of the people I was working with in LA in that scene were actually urban natives. So I'm like not urban native in the sense like post-termination era urban natives usually inhabit these cities. So I was around and learning from a lot of elders who had been displaced as part of the termination era, who were being drawn into cities with promises of jobs, basically, because the United States was trying to destroy reservations and tribal nations to forcibly assimilate Native people. So LA has the biggest population, or it did at the time, it had the biggest population of urban natives in the US. And I got to meet so many of them, like as a teenager. And I think thinking of that and moving through a city, and I think about this in every city I go, every tour, but anytime I'm visiting any spaces, whose homelands are these? And also an awareness, like, I never wanted to be disrespectful to a city because it was always the thought, like, this is someone's home. Like, everywhere is someone's home. And at one point it was, and it still is. And I always had that strangeness where I was always thinking, like, this is a city that sucks in some ways, but at the same time, there are people who have carved out community here. Like, these are people who survived, and you know, I have a respect for the city in some way because it's, you know, it's a special home and it has its own history. And for example, like Bunker Hill, if you're not familiar, that was like where all the city Indians moved post termination, and now it's a bunch of like bank buildings and stuff. But moving through that space, it feels very, very powerful. Like there's a feeling like there's still a presence there. And also on top of that, this is really interesting. You should look into this as well because I know they're up here. But there was also the coexistence of sacred spaces and the city. A lot of the time, in one of our community theater productions, we actually were actively fighting to prevent the city from bulldozing a sacred site of the Tongva. And that was also reality. You know, you could be in a really sacred, beautiful space, and then you walk 2 steps and there's like, you know, a high-rise building or something. And it's an active act of asserting a visibility to resist that erasure that's happening, sometimes in a very violent way. So the third section is usually in this book grappling with a lot of those ideas. And this poem, Creation Story Blues, it opens with a quote from Tommy Orange, which is, "An urban Indian belongs to the city, and cities belong to the earth," because they do. This is a desert, like any other. Towers, like cacti, suck water from the sky. Aloes shadow the cold dark if the Santa Anas blow in early. Rivers are scarce. The A-line, thin blue vein, spits us out at Long Beach, so we drive everywhere instead. I ask you questions from the passenger side, because I love to watch you stitch the world together. It's all the same, you say. This place is a burial ground. Ash curls across the 101 as fire claims a row of palms. You remind me that this city is homeland too, though it burns more often. So we speak kindly to the land when we can. Recognize the hills, sloping like arroyo banks, the winding highways carved like canyons. The sky was once a dark blanket. Your lips point to the lights shivering downtown. Almost stars, they spiral, startlingly bright through the windshield. Coyote threw up a basket of stars to shatter the black into brilliance. Tonight, the cars are white-fast comets slicing back and forth to exit this concrete body. Do the ghosts, too, feel comforted in the haze as you sing me the birth of the Milky Way? Thank you. Making a Monument Valley. You rock with the rose quartz, the sweetgrass, the cedar. In the summer, our city smells almost like dusk on the res. The reservoir too shallow, we imagine an ocean, the one that covered the four corners, the Citibank building. Hook a right down Bunker Hill, the one with the city Indians, their ghosts shadow the eucalyptus trees, let them haunt you. I like it that way. Up the 101 thick scarlet vein, I let you go, bumper to bumper, reclaim the land between each car. Fuck it, you honk. Let's be sovereign. We riot in the fumes, smoke lavender, tobacco, weeds. Logically, the land's been dead a long time. The smog says otherwise. The way it rises out of the valley every other week. A long breath let go. The Santa Anas carry all the scents back to us they tried to get rid of. Inhale. A long line of trucks breaks the jagged edge. We stop the car, hot, off Crenshaw. When you hop out, You swear the ground kicks just a little bit beneath your feet. Thank you. Okay, I just have, oh yeah, we're good. I have 2 more pieces. And then I would love to talk to you about whatever you want to talk about. If you have questions about book club, I love talking about book club. If you have questions about being a grad student, I'd love to talk about that too. If you want to talk about having beef with your English professor in college, that's coming up next. But this is a poem I love. It's very special to me. It's called Ancestors' Wildest Dreams. If you're like, you don't have to be native. I feel like most people on Facebook have seen those posts. And are like, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. And my friends would always joke in college or just with me in general, and they would say, girl, I don't feel like my ancestors' wildest dreams. I feel like they're like sleep paralysis demon or something. And I was like, that's good. No, I think that's something that's always in my mind. I struggle with severe depression and anxiety, and mental health wise, like, you have that feeling of like, bruh, like, did my ancestors really survive genocide for me to like not get out of bed? Like, that's crazy. But it is something that I feel like is so relevant to coming of age and like figuring out who you are and figuring out like how to just live your life with this beautiful life that you've been blessed with. So this is Ancestors' Wildest Dreams. Ancestors' wildest dreams are drunk on the sticky floor of a Denny's, texting grandma ayo ani nishne, and crying in the same hot breath about not knowing the right word for apology if one exists. Keyboard smashing, resilience, 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 as we delete Instagram so we don't have to see people out sacreding each other. Maybe we're only sovereign in bed sometimes, drowning in the dark, in the soft pools of their eyes, living off the hard tack of thighs, moving to an MCR mixtape we froth. Ancestors' sleep paralysis demon, caught in cold sweat and skipped therapy, untangling our bodies from sheets, always untangling ourselves out from under somewhere, fractals left in corners, under juniper berry branches. Do we even remember how grandma baked her pies? The corn stalks stretched higher than the holy people that year, and we came home buzzed on lemonade and an auntie's laughter. Everyone is always talking about an ancestor that is or isn't pleased, but I saw a strawberry moon tonight rising. I learned the word in my language for laugh. We found it together. Glo, 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 glo. We eat it. We setting spray it to the page. Thank you. Okay, I lied. I have 2 more. I have 2 more, and that's because I have a poem about black cats in here, and my favorite black cat lives here. In this, I'm like, she's right there. No, she lives. My 2 best friends have a black cat named Pear. But I love black cats. Navajos have a lot of taboos. If you know me, I'm always like, I'm always like doing that, and that's like to ward off like evil and stuff. We're like very superstitious. But one thing you will never see me hating on a black cat. That's my girl. Like, she's little. They're always so sweet. And my older sibling is also a veterinarian. And so the sad side of this, I'm like, if you don't know this, it's good to know. But on Halloween, a lot of black cats get adopted, and then because of taboos and because people like hate them so much. So if you see one, be nice to them is basically the moral of the story. But this is a poem about wicked women. This is Song for the Black Cat outside my mother's apartment. We know what it is to not be wanted when our bodies are taboo. Night limbs, how our eyes swallow everything. When I was brought into the world, I looked back. The trees were heavy with dark. They say a wicked woman walks bad luck. What makes a wicked woman? Irises green with want, barbed tongues to catch what's coming. I want to move through the trees as you do. 4 palms flush to the earth. Dark river with 2 wild torches in a corner. Living shadow, the same color as forgetting. How many lives can I hold in each chamber of my heart? Thank you. Okay, the last one, I'm like, turn off the camera. We're about to get real. No, but my last poem, I had a professor in college, and she didn't have like the best reputation with her students of color. I mean, going to some place like Yale, I never expected to go into a classroom and be like, oh, wow, I love this syllabus, you know. But this professor like put up a fight. There was a day where she told us to stop bringing in Ocean Vuong, Ada Limon, and I think Joy Harjo, which is funny because 2 of those people ended up being the U.S. Poet Laureate, like right after that happened, like back to back, which is really funny. But I remember I was in office hours, and I had friends who were in that class as well who would come out of office hours like feeling very like low and defeated, and I was like, oh, it can't be that bad. I went to office hours, and she would point at things in my poems. And she would say, I don't get this. You need to take it out. And everything she was pointing to was a reference to just like native stuff. She pointed to like the National Museum of the American Indian, and she was like, what is this? And I was like, girl, like it literally says it. Like, what are you talking about? You have Google. And I always say to my students too, I'm like, if they want us to learn Greek mythology and like be able to conjure that like that for literature, like they can Google a reference you have, or maybe the point is they're not supposed to know. Maybe the point is that a specific audience is supposed to recognize that, and that's kind of like the power of that poem. So anyways, one day we had a particularly like rough meeting, and I went back to my college, like my dorm, and I wrote this poem. This is the last poem in the collection. And it's my rantina. It's like my angry sister. So this is Blacklist Me. Also, don't let anybody ever bully you into writing things you don't want to write. Because those poems she pointed to are like now in this book, exactly as they were when she didn't like them. So whatever. This is Blacklist Me. None of my ancestors are on the radio. None of my ancestors are. But my sister refurbished an 8-track, and I want Indian rock and roll in her purest form. Indians huddled in a basement somewhere, listening to bootlegged tapes, except the basement's not a basement. It's a truck bed. Someone's uncle's GMC, wheedling over a lip of river, 'cause the best thing about rock and roll is you don't have to do anything right to survive. You don't even have to make sense to a white English professor who wants chronology when I want 6 strings and a truck careening into the horizon. I want the explosion as grand as cicadas amping out the sound of night as the 8-track rolls and rolls, and my favorite singers live forever instead of on some balding president's blacklist. And through the smoke, I almost want to mistake a splinter of moonlight for Mildred Bailey's pinky ring. All the Indians dusting themselves off and laughing at the smolder. The little wheels spin and spin, the little wheels spin. Thank you. Okay, that's all I'm gonna read for now. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I'm like, let's talk. Let's talk. And it can be about, it can be about the book. It can be about book club process, anything. Yeah.
How do you feel taking up space and like showing up for yourself and for peers in spaces that are so colonial, like, you know, these graduate programs, and even in the publishing world, like Indian Girls Book Club is such a power, and how amazing that is, and like, I guess, how have you fought against people trying to water down what you're trying to put out there? And I guess, what is that like for you?
Yeah, I think coming into publishing and writing, I think some of the overarching feeling that I felt, I got into like poetry and reading my work really young, and I was so shy before that. Like my family didn't even know I wrote poetry until I had to perform it. And so I think the feeling and the moving into those spaces, kind of being like thrown into them in a way, was like loneliness, like just isolation, which you learn and realize is part of the machine and part of what they're trying to do to make you feel powerless. Individualism is a tenet of Western society versus collectivism, and that was kind of like the solution, was community. Like realizing that I was not the first person actually in a lot of these spaces. There were really strong women, especially Navajo women, who had come before me and done amazing things, and like talking to them and actually like learning from them and sharing, I think one reassured all of us that we were not alone. I think that has to do with book club. Like book club was born from a lot of those conversations, and a lot of authors, you know, who had these horrible experiences but didn't have other natives in publishing to talk to. There's like tribes where they have one person who's being published. Like we just had an event with somebody who's like the first person in their tribe to like have a published book. You know, like that feeling of isolation, I think, is the thing that book club tries to combat the most, because at least for me, like I would have never continued writing if I hadn't found people to have those conversations with. So I think power numbers for sure. I think like it is exhausting, I think, too, because you're pushing usually for change that's a lot more radical than people want. And especially with big publishing houses, they have very specific ways of doing things. They have like numbers they want to meet. They have money they want to make. But I think showing too, like, and everything we do, it's like we go the extra mile to show that there's a huge demand for Native literature. And also the data is there. Like we know that it has an amazing, incredible, life-changing impact on the mental health of our youth. Like we know that suicide rates drop, you know, when that happens. And so to show up with that data, which is usually presented by like Native scholars and Native academics themselves, to support them as well. And I think that kind of reciprocity where like we're supporting them, they're supporting us with the data, like that also shows the kind of like, it's like a translation almost to like what they want to see, like publishers being like, oh, we can't lie our way out of this or something because the numbers are there. So I think that's, yeah, kind of our power is community. All of us really care about this work. If I'm sure book club would be here if they could be. Like Lily, my best friend Lily Painter, who runs book club with me, like we met online when we were like 13. We both cosplayed. If you didn't know that about me, I used to cosplay. But that was how I met a bunch of people who really cared very deeply about like books, for example. And so, yeah, these are people who I think also like I really care about. And I know that they care very deeply about the work that we do. Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have a moment with either like book club or the book you wrote that you're really proud of?
Yeah, I do. I have this crazy... Okay, so when I was in Durango, there was this like... This is so random. If he's watching, hi Bruce. There was this man, this Bilgana, this white guy, who my grandma called his her blue-eyed son, because he speaks Navajo and like, but he's white. it's like a long story. He like knew my whole family back in Navajo Mountain. And he came to my reading in Durango. And at the end of the reading, he gave me this pink abalone. It was like the most beautiful abalone. And he told me the story, which it was this whole story about how when my grandparents were alive on my mom's side, he had received 3 pink abalone as a gift, and he gave them to my grandparents, 2 of them. And he forgot one of them. And he was so upset because he wanted to give it to one of my aunts or like somebody else in the family to say thank you, basically, because they took him in and all this. And he said for so many years, he was like, for like 20 something years, like I felt like I should have given it. Like I just had this feeling. And he was like, it was you. He was like, it was you. He was like, I was waiting for the third person to give this to, and it was you. And your grandparents wanted me to give you this. And bye. I'm like, literally Pisces. I like cry at every reading. But that I think my family, like when my family shows up, like when people from like Navajo Mountain, like my home community, when they show up and they love my poetry, like that's the only thing that matters. Like that's literally the only thing that matters to me. So I'm proud. Like. And my mom doesn't even like poetry, and she likes my poetry, so I feel like those are all things that I really that's been really touching. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Laura.
Do you have any 2025 goals for yourself in your artistic career or for book club?
Yes. Oh, yes, I do. I'm working on my second book. I'm really excited. Yes, it's been really fun. I have been leaning into my obsessions. I'm writing I'm like, how much do I give away? I'm like, don't steal this from me. But it's like kind of like a twist on like travelogues. Like oh, it's just really interesting. I don't want to say too much though, but one thing that it is exploring is like the Harvey houses, which I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but it's like the railroads in the Southwest, and like basically like tapping into alternate ways of like knowing spaces and like cities and landmarks and stuff like that. So it's been really fun to write it. I'm like, should I tell you the title? Probably not. Oh, maybe we'll wait because this is on. If this were off, I would say it. They're like, turn it off. I think for me, I'm trying to say no to more things. I just love saying yes. I'm a yes girl. But for book club, I'm so excited. Our goal was to go after the like big book drop we had. We were like, we want to do this every year. Like if not every year, like every other year. But this year we're going to Alaska, which is like so amazing. And we're going to be traveling by boat to some of these locations. I know, I'm like, let's get a pink boat. Like, let's get a pink barge. Like, fill it up with books. But we're going to be working with Tlingit and Haida communities. And we're working with communities that are like known to be very hard to get to. And that's the point. So like we're putting in like the extra effort and time to get native authored books to communities that like usually are considered book deserts or don't have access to those stories. So that's really exciting. That was a goal of ours, and I'm super excited to go up there. Thank you for that question. Are there any others? Yeah.
How did you decide a grad program?
How did I decide on a grad program? There's so many reasons. There's so many reasons. Yeah, I was deciding between 2. And I just loved so many more things about one than the other. Like, I loved the faculty. I loved they flew me out. And they flew everyone out who got in. And we visited and we went dancing in Nashville. I'm like, yeah, I love Nashville. I love line dancing. Like, girl, I'm dancing with cowboys out there. Like, I'm at the time of my life. But no, I think that was also part of it too, was like, I travel a lot for work. And so I'm like, it came down to the airport, like Iowa City versus Nashville. Yeah. No, there were a lot of reasons. And if anybody's choosing a grad program or an MFA program and you like, you're like, I don't know where to look or what to choose. That's something I'm always open to talking about. So you can always just DM me or ask me, like, whatever. I was literally living here, and I was like, you were there. I was living here and like trying to figure out what I was gonna do like with my life, like whether it was an MFA or an MA. And I'll tell you too, I chose an MFA program because I want to teach. Like I want to go home and I want to teach students like creative writing. So to me, that was the path that made the most sense. Thank you for your question. Yeah.
So you have grad school and you have the book club and now you're on tour. How do you avoid creative burnout and how do you make sure you find time for writing?
Okay, I'm cheating because I'm in grad school and I have a poem due every week. So I think for me, deadlines are good. Like I procrastinate a lot. So sometimes having like goals or deadlines is really helpful. So I mean like full credit to my peers who like show up every week with amazing comments and like reading their work too. Like reading, that's the thing that keeps me from creative burnout is reading and interacting with other people's work. And that's something that like surprisingly stopped. Actually, no, unsurprisingly stopped when I was in college because reading becomes more of it's just academic. It's like something you don't really enjoy so much. So rediscovering my joy for reading, diving into that, I think also switching genres helps sometimes. Like if I'm done with poetry, I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna give that a rest. I'll put it away. It's gonna like, what is it, ferment or something. And then I'm gonna go to fiction, maybe try something short story, flip between those. But also getting out in nature. Like that sounds really simple, but I think I just forget how much I'm inside and like how much I'm also like committed to like, I gotta work, like I gotta make myself have output. And just like having a break, like when you do go outside and you see something, like that is just as important to the creative process. Because you can totally have a spontaneous moment where you're like, oh, I know what I'm gonna write about, you know? I would say those things. For some reason, my cat keeps like popping into my head. My cat keeps popping into my head. I think that, but she has to do with like my space too. I think the best advice I got from somebody who I did a writing residency with, they were like, you need to take yourself seriously, which is, if you know me, that's really hard to do. But like you should treat yourself like this is your job as a writer, like, or as an artist. You need to respect your own practice. Like if you have time in the day that you're most productive, like don't brush it off. Like that's your office hours, you know, that's like your work time. Like put a sign on the door if you have kids, for example, or you have people in your space, be like, put a sign on your door. You know, have a chair or a blanket that's really comfy. And for me, it's my cat. Like whenever I'm typing, she'll come and like sit on my lap. And so actually she's been really helpful, I think, in making me feel comfortable in a space. That helps me write. Any other questions? And then I think one more question. Yeah.
I'd love to know what your process was for compiling and organizing the collection.
Yeah. In college, this was my thesis in college originally. We had to write 5 poems every 2 weeks. And at the end of that, I had like an overall idea of, I was writing about music. But I think the sections came pretty naturally. I had 4 sections. 4 is a sacred number, like for Navajos, for a lot of people. But I was always like, oh, it's gonna be 4 sections. So then it was themes, you know, usually order-wise, it's like what poems speak to each other, usually first and last lines, like how they speak to each other. And just images, like the ocean, I think, was something that really moved me. I did illustrations for a lot of these poems, actually. Like, I did illustrations in color. I used to want to be a comic book artist, by the way. Like, I love visual art. I have friends from, like, summer camp here, too. And, like, I met these two at the art shack, literally. Like, we were making our little, like, art pieces and stuff. And, like, I think all of those multimodal expressions, like, talk to each other, too. So sometimes I didn't even know that pieces belonged together until I drew something. But then, yeah, a lot of editing. My best friend Logan was the first one to read my whole manuscript. And I think sharing was important too. Like, reading the poems out loud until they felt like they had a home, because a book is a home. It's just a home for poems. And I think also in compiling it, it felt like it was done. I felt like it was done when I was sick of myself, like sick of hearing myself talk in my poems. But I think it felt done when I felt like, I guess it felt like I had just done my best work and the poems felt authentic to what I was thinking and dreaming of when I was writing them. Yeah, I think so. I think Fleetwood Mac was like the last puzzle piece in this collection, for sure. There's like a little poem that mentions rumors. Yeah, I think that's all we have for now. Yeah, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming out. This has meant so much to me, and I love this city so much. It is really, really, really special and insane to me that people read something that I write. And being a poet, being a writer is like it can be such a solitary thing. And you don't know if people will read any of it or care. And I think that's something that I'm so grateful for, is that I care so much about these stories. Like, a lot of them aren't mine. And to know that people want to hear them, or it makes them think of their own families and their own histories, that is really meaningful. So I really appreciate it. This is it's a two-way thing. So I thank you so much for being here. And come get a stamp and a sign, a little signature. Thank you.
Don't give one more hand. Let's keep it going. Keep it going. So many more. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you all for being here and sharing in this with us. This has been a really special evening. Thank you for starting the year out right with us. We really appreciate it. I'll be brief. If you, so Kinsale is going to be at the back desk, right where this whiteboard is. There's a copy of the book there. You will see it there. If you want your book signed, which you should take the opportunity to have your book signed. Books are available for purchase at the front register near where you came in. If you didn't pick one up, you can find them there. If you have any other questions, let me know. I'm happy to help you. If not, we have a lot of books. Make yourself comfortable. Take a look around. We will see you next time. Thank you so much.